everyone. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in Los Angeles. Juan Gonzalez is in New York, and our guests are here in Los Angeles. We're joined by Robert Scheer, longtime journalist based in California, who's editor-in-chief of Truthdig. His most recent book, They Know Everything About You: How Data Collecting Corporations and Snooping Government Agencies Are Destroying Democracy. And Torie Osborn joins us, longtime progressive activist based in Los Angeles. She served as Northern California director for the National Organization for Women and was the first female executive director of the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Juan?
I'd like to start with Bob Scheer. You've written a lot about our financial system and the banks, and of course, this is a central issue between Hillary Clinton and Senator Sanders in this campaign. Your response to the controversy around Senator Sanders' stance and Hillary Clinton's position on how to deal with the nation's biggest banks?
Well, I think Hillary Clinton was exposed last night as a serious demagogue on the banking issue. It was unbelievable to me. She knows, she raised the question, or she made the statement, we can never let Wall Street wreck Main Street again. Well, who did it the first time? It was her husband, in alliance with Phil Gramm of the Republicans, who reversed Glass-Steagall and opened the door to the too big to fail. It was her husband, by the way, who signed the bill into law that she accuses Bernie Sanders of having somehow engineered. And that was the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which Bill Clinton and Lawrence Summers, his Treasury Secretary, and Phil Gramm pushed through Congress. He did it as a lame duck president. It's that legislation tucked into an omnibus bill. So only 4 people in the House voted against it. Ron Paul was one of them on the libertarian side. Yes, Bernie Sanders went along with this threat that if you don't vote for the omnibus bill, people don't get paid and so forth and so on. It was Bill Clinton's bill. She has done this now repeatedly, blaming Bernie Sanders for the failure to regulate credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations, all of this junk, which was made legal by a bill pushed by Bill Clinton, signed into law by Bill Clinton, and I believe done to enhance her coming race for the Senate in New York, where she got an enormous amount of money from Wall Street. Bill Clinton's first Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin, was at that point ensconced at Citigroup, a bank allowed to form because of the reversal of Glass-Steagall, a merger of investment and commercial banks. So she knows what's been going on. And to blame Bernie Sanders, I covered this for the LA Times. I wrote a book on it called The Great American Stick-Up. I know the record very well. And she's simply lying about it.
Torie Osborn.
Well, I'm not an expert on the economy, but I will tell you that Dodd-Frank is the law of the land. Hillary Clinton has been really clear. She stood up to Big Pharma back when Hillary Care was killed by Big Pharma and the insurance companies. She's a fighter. She has positioned herself center-left. She's going to be elected president of the United States. And I think the real issue is, how do we go forward? I like Paul Krugman. I agree with Paul Krugman, who is her economic guru. She's definitely moved to the left from her husband's position. She's not going to put Robert Rubin in as her Treasury Secretary. I think that it'll be fascinating to see how she incorporates the growing progressive economic equity part of the Democratic Party that Bernie has brilliantly organized and mobilized. So to me, what's most important is that Hillary is she's progressive. She's a leader. She has far better track record of actually getting things done than Bernie Sanders, who I knew very well in Vermont. He's given the same speech now that he gave back in 1974. I lived there from 70 to 76 in my early days of anti-war and feminist activism and sort of formative days when he was working the Liberty Union Party. And I'll tell you, I don't think he's changed. Now, economic inequality has grown. His message has become more relevant. I'm glad he's raising it. You know, to me, the most interesting thing about the debate last night, the most interesting thing, besides the Israeli-Palestinian issue, which I do want to say was astonishing and a thing of beauty that he had the courage to say what he did, but it was that we were fighting about $12 or $15 an hour minimum wage. I mean, I worked on the county raising to $15 an hour. It was only 2 years ago that here in Los Angeles that Mayor Garcetti put forward $13.25. It seemed radical at the time. Passed the baton over to the labor movement. The fight for 15, swept through, and now California. Now Jerry Brown has signed the law. I'm telling you that what's important here is that we're having a debate about $12 to $15 an hour, not whether Hillary believes, as many progressive economists do, that it might be too much of a burden on some rural and small business economies if you move too quickly to 15. So, I think the issue of Wall Street, I think there's, good progressives disagree. Is the shadow banking industry as important as breaking up the big banks? How do you break them up? What are the tools within Dodd-Frank? How can you make Dodd-Frank perhaps more progressive? Well, you got to change Congress first.
I just wanted to clarify something, Torie Osborn. Had you ever been for Bernie Sanders? Or?
I was magnetized. Now, I'm not. The way it works for me in a campaign, it was true in 2008. I was for John Edwards, actually, because the poverty and the war were my issues. Then I was for Hillary, and then I was magnetized and became a strong Obama supporter. I quit my job in City Hall working for Mayor Villaraigosa and joined the Obama campaign as a full-time super volunteer for 2 months. This time, Hillary declared last April, and I listened to every word of her. I was checking her out, and I was actually pleased to see she talked about Wall Street, she talked about big pharma, she talked about health care reform, she talked about universal health care, she talked about free tuition or making tuition more accessible. And I thought, wow, she's really hitting the economic issues. Bernie then entered the race, and I thought, well, I've known him for many years. All my lefty friends are for him. I'm going to be for Bernie. And there was less there than met the eye from me. I have tremendous respect for the movement he's built, for the secular revival, the political, social movement that he's built, and I have lots of questions about how that energy can be captured on a going-forward basis.
Scheer, you disagree with Torie Osborn.
Come on, let's look at what the Clintons represent. Triangulation. Ending the Roosevelt legacy in the party, reversing
that was then. This is now.
Reverse. Oh, it's then. That's the reality.
That was the 90s. We're not in the 90s, Bob.
But the policies that were in place.
But the policies that Hillary Clinton is putting forward is not the same.
I know. And look.
Don't blame her for Bill Clinton.
Okay. You mentioned you work for Antonio Villaraigosa, a fellow I know well. You obviously work for Sheila Kuehl now and supervisor. They're nice people. The fact is, it was Mayor Villaraigosa that ordered the police to smash the Occupy movement in Los Angeles. I was there that night. I was out in the street. It was barbaric. It was brutal. And yes, progressive mayors in every city, most of whom were Democrat, I guess one in New York who claimed to be a Republican, and they smashed this movement. It's because of that movement, which addressed the problem that has accelerated since the Clintons came to office. You could, yes, Ronald Reagan was not able to put through the kind of radical deregulation he was speaking about. Bill Clinton did the triangulation. And that income gap in America that Bernie Sanders was warning about has mushroomed. And let me just say something. You say you followed Hillary Clinton's career. I interviewed Hillary Clinton. I interviewed her husband when I was working for the LA Times down in Arkansas. They championed the slogan, both of them, championed the slogan, let's end welfare as we know it. And what they did is they ended the main federal anti-poverty program, aid to families with dependent children. 70% of the people on that program were children. 70% were children. They claimed they had a program in Arkansas called Project Success that was helping people get off welfare. It was a nonsense program. It never happened. It never worked. Okay, Peter Edelman, she always says, I work with the Children's Defense Fund, Marion Wright Edelman. Peter Edelman was in the Clinton administration. He broke over this question of so-called welfare reform. He's written a devastating book. Robert Reich was the Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. He is supporting Bernie Sanders. Why? Because he saw the inside of Clinton triangulation. On domestic policy, it's been a total caving in to Wall Street, and this income disparity, which Bernie Sanders was warning about, you say, back in the 70s, has become an uglier reality now. And you're saying we should trust the very people who opened the door to Wall Street to now solve the problem. I think it's utter nonsense. And let me say something about Israel. As a Jewish person, by the way, I am so proud that the first Jewish candidate that has a chance of being president has unmasked this terrible policy of ignoring the human rights of Palestinians, their aspiration, and backing Netanyahu, a guy who just doesn't even believe in any serious way in the two-state solution. And by the way, Hillary mentioned Mohammed Morsi, a graduate of the University of Southern California, got his doctorate there, and she said, I talked to him. Why doesn't she mention that he's in jail facing death? The first elected person to run Egypt is in jail facing death, and that Hillary Clinton was part of an administration, and after this administration, she has supported an accommodation with the military rulers of Egypt that have totally reversed that democratic experiment. So this is utter nonsense. The woman is a Margaret Thatcher hawk on foreign policy. She carries water for Wall Street. And you talk about the shadow economy. My God, her son was set in business with a hedge fund by Lloyd Blankfein from Goldman Sachs. You know, and by the way, her top financial advisor, Gary Gensler, was a Goldman Sachs partner, went in was in the Clinton administration, was part of this whole deregulation of Wall Street. He's calling the shots in her campaign on the economy. Well, and she still turns to those very same people. So you can't whitewash that record. It's real.
I agree.
Like to, if I can, I'd like to ask both Bob Scheer and Torie Osborn about this whole issue. It's true. I completely agree that a political leader can change and can adopt a more progressive or less progressive positions over time. But I'm wondering how much of the change in viewpoint of some of the centrist Democrats, and I would classify both Governor Cuomo right here in New York and Hillary Clinton in that camp of formerly centrist Democrats, have been affected by this enormous grassroots movement that has developed from the Dreamers to the Fight for 15, to the Occupy movement, to the climate, the movement around climate change, these massive movements all around the country. How much of these centrist leaders have changed their positions in order to remain relevant to the changing nature of political thought among the masses of American people?
Well, I agree with you, and I think the reason that Hillary Clinton positioned herself center-left, and by the way, you govern from the center-left. You do not govern from the left, as Bernie's marginal status in Congress for 30 years shows. I mean, he has done nothing. He did nothing before he was elected mayor of Burlington, and he has done very, very little. 17 amendments and 2 post office bills is not a track record that is substantive in Congress. But I agree with you, and I completely agree with you, and this is why I think rather than railing at the past, at the Clintons of the past who carried the water for the right on criminal justice and on welfare reform, I completely agree with it, and set in motion a piece of what the right wing, starting, you know, in the 60s and coming to fruition in 1980 with Ronald Reagan and beyond, had continued to rig the system, to change the system, to, you know, not just mass incarceration and the, you know, racism and what we've seen in the growing prison industrial complex, but of course the economic injustice. But here's where I completely agree with you. When Hillary gave her speech a year ago, and that I listened to every word. I was hanging on every word because I wanted to believe that a woman could be president. I would have rather it was Elizabeth Warren, frankly, but it wasn't. It was Hillary Clinton, and I wanted to see, was she going to talk about issues that matter to me as a 40-year progressive activist? And she did, and it's because of the Dreamers. It's because of the marriage equality struggle. It's because of Black Lives Matter. It's because of, and I don't know if I would agree with you characterizing them as mass movements, but I think that they've been effective and powerful and important movements. And I think they have changed the debate, as Occupy changed the debate and forever on 1% and 99 cents. But that's really the question. Guys, I mean, I hate to tell you, but Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. Bernie Sanders, I think, has galvanized and unleashed young people. He's not going to win. He's not going to win New York, Pennsylvania, or California. And so the question really is, what happens next to those of us in the progressive
Very quick comment
movement?
from Robert Scheer as we wrap up.
Yeah, well, I think this is how we got into this mess. Jerry Brown, when he was running against Bill Clinton, said we're always faced with by these people with the not the lesser of two evils, but the evil of two lessers. It's a line I'm taking from my wife's book on California that's coming out, but it's a good statement. They helped get us into this mess. Let's not miss what this election is all about on the Republican and Democratic side. On the Republican side, you have a neo-fascist person in Trump, in the form of Trump, and something of a religious fanatic in Ted Cruz, but they are addressing real discontent across the board. The economy is not working for most Americans, okay? And so there's a right-wing populist appeal that is wiping away the Republican Party. On the Democratic side, much to the amazement of everyone, Bernie Sanders has been able to register a populist progressive dissent. Okay, he is a uniter. He doesn't bait immigrants. You know, he understands the need for unity in the country. But the fact of the matter is, if you go for Hillary Clinton, you go for more of the same. I'll tell you my takeaway from the debate.
Win.
I want to tell you, but you're winning.
Get real.
Get real. You're winning. Your winning gets us into a war in Iraq, which Democrats supported with Republicans.
Not if we do our work.
If we do our work. The fact is, sellout politics have made the situation much more treacherous, and the reason so many young people are against it is because they see it doesn't work for them. And if you want to look at the record, if Hillary Clinton, these problems, what does she do with? You talk about deportation. Yes, Obama's failed on immigration. He has been called the deporter-in-chief.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, she supported that policy. She didn't. No, take the minimum wage. You keep telling me Hillary Clinton has evolved. The Clintons have been in power in the Democratic Party for so long. Why didn't they move on the minimum wage? Why didn't they move in a more peaceful area?
Because, as you know, it takes some movement from below to push the issue forward.
No, they're not pushable. They are sellouts.
That's not true. She's clearly pushable.
The record is
she
so
supports
clear.
$15 an hour.
She supports it now because she's going to lose the primary if she doesn't come out for it. And she supported it last night very half-heartedly. What you are talking...
That's not true. She stood up there with Governor Cuomo.
If you go down the road with Hillary Clinton...
Don't rewrite the record.
If you go down the road with Hillary Clinton, the right wing will be stronger. That's what happened in Europe historically.
It's not the worse,
it's what's happening in Europe now. The fact of the matter is, if you do not address the problems from a progressive side, which Bernie Sanders is proposing, you're going to leave people hurting. They're hurting in this country. You may not be hurting working for the county and a supervisor, part of the Democratic establishment. I know. I live downtown.
On the Democratic establishment.
It was the Democratic
40 years of progressive activism, Bob. Come on.
You worked for the supervisors.
I worked for the supervisor who's a progressive supervisor who's
the Democratic establishment in Los Angeles, by the way, has a racist... tolerated, the supervisors tolerated a racist sheriff's department, a racist police department, crushed Occupy, did not address any of these questions whatsoever. And now you tell us we need more of the same. The voters are rejecting more of the same. That's what's going on. Yes, you represent more of the same. That's what Hillary Clinton is.
We're going to leave it there, but clearly there is a lot to talk about in these coming weeks and months. Robert Scheer, editor-in-chief of Truthdig, Torie Osborn, longtime progressive activist who served as Northern California director of the National Organization for Women and was executive director of the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and the Liberty Hill Foundation. This is Democracy